Welcome, dear listeners, to the very first interview-based episode of Questioning Behaviour, where we look into what we do, how we do it, and almost most importantly, why we do it.
You're the dummy that don't believe in science. All your projects always be denying. You're the dummy that don't believe in science.
And today we are going to be questioning the behavioural science of online dating.
That's exactly what we're going to do. One of my favourite topics.
We have had some experience with online dating. I don't know about you, Mela.
Yeah, I think if you're in our generation, you actually can't escape online dating. I think I've had Tinder installed from the young age of, I think as soon as I went to university. So approximately, I was 17, I think, when I installed Tinder. Everyone had it. It became quite the rage. So yeah.
I mean, we've really grown up on this idea of the gamification of dating, right? Swiping left, swiping right on first impressions of people.
I mean, first impressions. Let's just call Tinder what it is. It is you look hot. I'll swipe to or I think it's the right. And then, I don't think you're really my type, to put it quite politely. I'll swipe you to the left. And it's just, I mean, is that a game, or is it just, I don't even know if I would consider that a game. It's quite different from Candy Crush, but I suppose you could pass some hours with it.
Well, I kind of wonder how successful, a dating app like this is going to be. It's relying a lot on your sort of system one brain, your automatic decision-making processes. And as we know from research in behavioral science, sometimes your biases and your heuristics and your cognitive shortcuts get in the way of you making the best decisions.
But I mean, so this is the thing. If you're applying system one reasoning on the longer term, this is probably not that great an idea. If you want to find someone that you're actually compatible with, that you can start a long-term relationship with. But if I'm thinking online dating, like Tinder and apps like Tinder are quite a specific category to me. You don't go on Tinder to find the love of your life. You find, you go on Tinder to find your love of that night, maybe is a better way of putting it. Whereas if I'm thinking about, long-term compatibility, stable relationships, having future goals in mind, activating system 2, if you will, I think I would go on something more like, seeing this, how much I know about online dating. The type of dating, not app even, but dating site, I don't know, OkCupid, is that one of them? Where you have
Right.
God knows how many personality tests, God knows how many questions you have to answer. And then you actually get some proper compatibility matching, stuff like that. I think there's more actual behavioral science behind those type of dating mediums.
Yeah. I mean, so depending on what you're looking for, right? Different apps provide different marketplaces, can we call that?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Right? So the supply and demand of dating. It's quite an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I don't want to suggest that people are objects, right? That this is sort of a trading market, but there is a sense that sometimes the market doesn't work when there's too much supply and not enough demand.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if there's a lot of people out there who just want to, go on Tinder and crash at someone else's place for a night, and there's another whole bunch of people who, have the demand for people that spend, the rest of the nights of their life with them, you're gonna run into some issues, and either one settles for the other or no one gets anything, which is gonna be quite the interesting equilibrium. But of course, predominantly on Tinder, there is men who are looking for women and women who are looking for men. So we predominantly deal and match with men, I would argue. And what you get then is that the swiping behavior, to even call it that, is very different between men and women. Very different, and that definitely influences how demand and supply work.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of my male friends, and they often tell me that they just swipe right on pretty much every profile they come across, because they find that if they're only swiping for people they're interested in, they don't get any matches, or they get very, very few matches.
So do you then think that they're punching above their weight, as it's called oh so nicely?
I don't know. I think maybe it's just you can't have two sides of the market being too selective.
Sure.
right? So if women are being very, very selective, they're only swiping on people who they're really, really interested in. I mean, that's a byproduct of them maybe getting lots of matches. They have to become more selective. And a byproduct of men not getting enough matches is that they have to become less selective.
So there's a very clear strategy to the game of online dating. Well, with that kept in mind, maybe we should check whether this is actually what is going on and what behavioral science has to say about probably even gender disparities between how we approach online dating. So let's take this to our expert. And our expert of today is Mark Brooks. Welcome to the show, Mark. Mark, would you actually like to introduce yourself as an expert?
Sure, my pleasure. So I have focused on the dating industry for many, many years, since going back 20 years now. And so I got started working for a little company called Hypermatch in 2000. Actually, before that, I ran an adventure club in Silicon Valley and got hooked on the dating industry. I just figured this is where there was a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room for impact, really.
When you say you ran an adventure club, is that the reason you got into dating? Do you see dating as a massive adventure?
You know what happened? I just moved to Silicon Valley and I got bored. I couldn't find a club I liked, so I stuck up a poster in Noah's Bagels in Sunnyvale. And people talked and my little club grew, and then a weird thing started happening. People started getting married. And I thought, you know what? That's a lot of responsibility. I'm kind of responsible for that. I got invited to a wedding party, and it's like, wow, I kind of did that. If I hadn't run that event, if I hadn't nudge these two folks together in some ways, they're going to make babies, they're going to have families, and then one of the couples broke up after having a baby, actually. And that really drove the point home. It's like, holy cow, that's a lot of responsibility. Did I screw up?
Well, I think there might have been more than just you, if they had to break up.
Yeah, you can't take too much responsibility there, surely.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that was serendipity in the extreme. But when it comes to dating, we do have levers that we pull and questions that we ask, and that biases the way people think about each other. And that there's a fair amount of responsibility there. And I think there should be more science behind that. And so that's really the basis of taking an interest in behavioral economics is, people don't really know what they want, is my general observation. And people don't really self-describe very well. So if you look at their behaviors, you get a better idea of what they really want, at least in the moment, and who they really are. They represent themselves a bit better over the longer term when you look at their behaviors. Because people tend to put their guard up when they're dating. And when it's tough to really get a sense of people. But you can look in on their behaviors and get some sense of who they are. Kind of looking at behaviors and correlating them to character is really what we're beholden to for really delivering on the true promise of the dating industry over the longer term.
So it sounds like you're describing a situation where people's intentions or their stated preferences don't quite match up with observed behavior. So the way that we see people using these apps. And I think that's a really interesting observation. I wonder, on the contrary, if there are any examples of sort of showstopper criterias, the types of criterias that people have for their potential relationships that you actually see reflected in their behavior on dating websites.
They will give you very clear showstopper criteria, actually. Like, a good one is, are you married? I mean, somebody wants someone perhaps for a longer term relationship. They're not going to be interested in someone who's married. That's the clearest showstopper. Another one is, do you smoke? Smokers are okay with smokers. Non-smokers don't generally want to date smokers. And you look towards India, my goodness, they've got 5 levels deep of complexity. We're actually relatively simple in the West. But if you look towards India, they've got astrology, they've got religion, they've got family, and then, yes, of course, they've got the caste system as well.
Yeah.
So it gets real complicated in certain places in the world.
So if it's so complex, plus the additional layer of people not really being able to describe themselves well or describing what they really want or what they think they're compatible with, how do you apply behavioral science to dating?
Well, here's a good example. Here's a great example. Plenty of Fish, actually. So I worked with Plenty of Fish for 6 years, and many years ago, they had a pretty rudimentary example of how to use behavioral science in terms of selection. So when you go on Plenty of Fish and you say you're interested, say you're a guy, you go on Plenty of Fish, you say, I'm interested in a long-term relationship. But then you proceed to search for a short-term relationship.
Mhm.
Then the Plenty of Fish algorithm will essentially cordon you off from the search set of women who are interested only in a long-term relationship. So the interests of the woman who is only interested in a long-term relationship are protected because she's only shown guys who have not only said they're interested in a long-term relationship, but are showing through their search behavior that they're also only interested in a long-term relationship. And of course, if the guy's search behavior changes, then he then comes up in the search set of the woman who is interested in a long-term relationship. So in that way, Plenty of Fish protects the interests of women who are saying and showing that they're also only interested in a long-term relationship. That's really rudimentary, but people definitely show what they're really interested in, not by what they say in their profiles initially, but what they're actually searching for. So, and that's a two-way street. So that's a good example.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's a great example of a rudimentary application or approach of behavioral science. What is actually the key role of behavioral science in dating? Like, what is it currently adding? What is the value that current scientific research adds to dating?
My background, I'll back up a bit to give you some context of my background and connection with behavioral science. So, in fact, my very initial interest in behavioral science came from a meeting I had with quite an amazing professor at MIT. And I was at Cupid.com. I was the VP of Cupid.com in 2004. And my CEO said, go to MIT, have a chat with this guy. He's kind of interested in dating. And so I paid this professor a visit, and it turned out to be Dan Ariely. And he just rocked my world. He told me a couple of really key things which stay with me still. He told me about halo effect.
Mm-hmm.
He said that when people have a limited bit of information about someone and they like what they see, then they tend to kind of fill in the blanks. And he also said it'd be a good idea if people play games on dating apps, because then they'd be, they'd let their guard down essentially and be who they really are and get to know each other a bit better. When you change the context from dating to gaming, then people think and they kind of become themselves again. So they're not preening and putting on a show.
I see. But what games are we talking? Like, am I supposed to challenge someone to a game of chess? Because I can't play chess, so that would be quite an effort. Or are we talking Mario Kart? Like, what games are we talking?
Something that requires some interaction, some verbal interaction, I think. Something cheeky, perhaps, so you can get a sense of someone's sense of humor too.
Sure.
Because that's a really big key to compatibility.
I've got the ultimate game then. Let's play some Cards Against Humanity. See if you're compatible.
I was just thinking of that, actually. Exactly.
Yeah. Nice taboo breaking, get a good
Exactly.
idea of what people think is appropriate and what is hilarious.
And putting people on the line, getting them a little uncomfortable. I think then they let their guard down a bit, especially if there's multiple people playing. So I think of, so I work with the Meet Group, and they've just launched a game which gets people talking and kind of opens people up. So there are some movements towards this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is getting people to move beyond IM. I mean, IM is extremely limiting. Of course, it's far better than email, and it's far better than mailing off a letter to a post box, which is what the original, newspaper-based personals did. You had to mail a letter off, and that was very slow, of course. So we've improved greatly on that model by speeding up communication. First it was email, then it went instant messaging, and now it's video. It seems to be the new realm, especially right now in the COVID-19 era.
Well, yeah, very topical.
Gravitating towards video, and the industry is definitely jumping on that bandwagon, and more apps are offering video because they can do the first date online, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for how the modern day use of technology has sort of sped up interactions, sped up the time that you get to know someone properly. How do you think that's really affected the way that people date?
Well, look, one key thing that we've really kind of optimized around having people stay on apps longer is paradox of choice. So on the one hand, it's not good for users to have too much choice. On the other hand, it's pretty good for dating apps to offer lots of choice because people are less inclined to decide. And so they stick around longer, and it becomes a game. And if you look at Tinder, the very origination of Tinder, I mean, they kind of implanted the language of let's play Tinder early on when they were on campus marketing. And that was
So
very key
yeah,
to what they've achieved, because it's not a cheesy dating app, dare I say it. It is a game, and
yeah,
it's fun, and it's shareable. And that's the real trick to why Tinder did so well. They became system one. It was emotional, raw, and not intelligent. But I think people do need to apply a bit of intelligence and a bit of thinking when it comes to matching. They want a bit more. And that's where Tinder has to grasp. I think that's what other apps are doing probably a better job, is that they're getting people to think a bit more. If you look at the likes of Hinge and S'more and the video dating apps, really, that get people in front of each other. And the whole point of dating is to get off the computer. I always think of there was a program in England called Why Don't You? I don't know, it's a long time ago. I mean, we're talking, God, showing my age now. I think about 35, 40 years ago, there was a program called Why Don't You? And the whole point of the program was they'd sing a tune, why don't you just get off this TV and go do something more interesting? Was their song and mantra. It's like, okay, I'm watching a TV program and they're telling me to get away from the TV program, go outside, do something more interesting. And that's the cheekiness of what Hinge has done. They say they're the dating app designed to be deleted, which I think is very refreshing in this day and age, but ultimately it's still rather, I think ultimately people need more help, and they shouldn't be deleting the apps. The app should be morphing to help them longer term. And
yeah. What type of
yeah.
morphing are you thinking of? Because your future vision for dating apps effectively sounds like you would continue to use behavioral science to get people, into the app, use system one, then use system two to actually get them to find someone who is there for the longer term, and that it might actually work out in the longer term. But your vision from there on moves away from dating almost into counseling.
Counseling is scary, and it's at a point at which things are broken. I think people need help, and they need to admit to wanting a bit of help before they ever get to that point. Once they get to that point, it's tough to really help. I think the long-term proposition is not to help people solve for a bad relationship. It's to make the most of a good one. So if we go backtrack, success. What is success in a dating app? A success for a dating app, really, from the company point of view, is to have people stick around for 6 months and to monetize over 6 months instead of 3. I think, okay, that's good. That's above average. Dating apps are pretty happy with that. But the problem is, that's a broken incentive structure. I think the true value of a dating app comes from making good matches. The only way to make good matches is to really get into people. The only way to really get into people is to observe their behaviors, because nothing shows the truth more than behavior. And then to be able to infer character traits off that, then you really get to do proper matchmaking. And of course, then the level of complexity deepens because you've got behavior indicating character. And then how do you actually show compatibility? That's where the science needs to go. That's what we need. We need a big dose of understanding compatibility based on character, based on behavior. I was like, that is what I'm grasping for long term, is if we can really get to know people, then we can deliver on the true promise of dating apps. And that is if we then should earn the right to be able to help people make more of their relationships. And success is indicated really in the double negative. The real value of dating apps and this kind of conglomeration of dating apps plus post-match assistance is in helping people not screw it up. It's the double negative, because that's where the pain is. The pain is when they screw it up, they mess up a wonderful relationship, and they mess up a family. I say mess up. I mean, everybody, there's a good proportion of relationships that fail. It's when they fail in the family context that they become extremely damaging individually and to the kids and to those kids' subsequent lives. So I think that's the value prop. There's a huge, there should be a lot more attention to this, I think a lot more resources, because I can't think of an industry outside of the medical industry that has more to offer to humanity.
Wow, that's a huge proposition.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a little bit paternalistic, potentially, but what you're saying is that dating apps should go beyond just offering a meeting place to meet like-minded people who are interested in something similar to what you're interested in, but to actually only be showing you your compatible matches, sort of guiding your choice.
Oh no, people do need freedom. They need to be able to search. I think there's a phase of dating where people are discovering themselves by going out and meeting people. So I think there is a very clear place for people to just go and meet people, and not necessarily in the context of dating, but just get out. For example, someone moves to a new town. What do? They're 22. They've just moved to a new town. They don't really know anyone. They're getting to know their own personal preferences from kind of a character and lifestyle perspective, and they're not sure what they want, and they certainly don't want to commit. So I think there are very key stages in people's lives when they're in kind of this exploratory mode and getting to know what they really want. And I think that is where we don't help that much. I think it's where we kind of take a back seat. But ultimately, things become formative through those dates and the feedback perhaps that we get from those dates from both parties. And then we've got the beginnings of what we can use to help them have better dates. What's that program? There's a wonderful program. I can't remember the name of it.
Give us a clue.
Hang the DJ.
Never heard of it. I'm sorry.
It's on Netflix.
Oh.
I can't remember the name of the program, but basically what the program says is they've got this, it's really freaky, weird, but they have...
It's Black Mirror.
Black Mirror, yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful episode, and very Gattaca, very kind of dark, as all Black Mirror episodes are, but what they talk about, what they show is a couple that meet, they've got an app, and it says you're going to be dating for a month.
Oh.
I was like, really? And that's it? They have to date for a month, and then that's it. So, and then at the end of the month, they get to know if they're parting or if they're going to be married.
Damn.
So they get a month, they get a year, and the app decides basically if they've got to part. And they have to part. I mean, if the app says you guys are not going to be together, they have to part. And through the dating experience, they get to know themselves, and the app gets to know them, and this kind of mother computer decides on who they're going to spend their life with, which is all very scary.
So this is not what you want. This is not what you're aiming for.
No, that's super scary. But it's a good thought experiment.
Sure,
I enjoyed that because it's a good thought experiment. There's some good stuff in there. And the good stuff is that people should get to know themselves and be aware of that process when they're dating. And I think people expect too much of themselves. They get dating and they expect a lot of themselves and the app and the other party. And the beginning stages, it is very exploratory.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's how do you figure out what you are not looking for unless you've experienced dating a couple of people. So it's all part of creating your preferences.
Yeah.
Having that experience, that lived experience.
Creating your preferences. Sarah, you're such an economist.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Actually, to get back to something you just mentioned, Mark, apparently the worst thing to do is to have all these type of expectations, to expect too much of yourself, to expect too much of the experience, or maybe to also expect too much of your partner, or the person you're currently dating, if you will. Is that the worst thing to do, to have expectations, like low or high expectations?
Well, it feeds into paradox of choice. People read the glossy magazines and they read the relationship advice, and some of it's good, some of it really helps them, moves them towards raising their expectations. I think of, there's a wonderful lady, Violet Lim, who runs a company called Lunch Actually in Singapore, and she's done extremely well with her company across Southeast Asia with multiple brands. But what she says is, to find the one, you need to be the one. And I think that's a great debiasing tool, just to think that through. To find the one, you need to be the one, meaning you need to be that one for someone else too. I think we tend to be very insular in our thinking about what we want. I. You can't think like that in a relationship. It's a pairing. And you need to think about what you have to offer as well. I mean, if we come across this constantly in dating, it's like people have very high expectations, and especially guys. You get guys who they're I hate to put a number on it, but a guy who's, I know I'm a 6, for example. I think about a 6. I remember going on Hot or Not many years ago, and I scored about a 6.
Okay, Mark,
do you have one?
that's really harsh.
Well, that's the reality. Women are a bit hard on guys, actually.
Oh,
when
okay.
it comes to,
I think women are the
So-
hardest on women, to be quite honest. So I think you might have come off that quite unscathed in comparison.
So would I want a 6? I think my wife is a 9. I've done it right.
Very well done, Mark. I'm very proud of you in this objective, almost bullshit way of measuring.
Oh, Hot or Not is quite a good tool for measuring kind of reality check. I mean,
I don't want it. I don't need it. I'll no, thank you.
Yeah, what do I do with that information? No, thank you.
Yeah, what if it's good information? I'm gonna have even higher expectations of someone I want to date. If it's terrible information, I'm gonna need to fix my ego. Like, neither of these are good. Anyway, with regards to Hot or Not, so you went into Hot or Not. Apparently, you turned out to be a 6. How was that experience for you, Mark?
Oh, well, I thought I was a bit higher than that. I would have thought I was like a 7, but I was one off. But okay. Was I searching for a 6? Not really, And I think that kind of reality check gets people to consider, how can I be better? How can I offer more? And I mean, women tend to be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to looks. Guys are not. Guys are very looks driven. I hate generalities, but that's a common one that we see, is women are a bit more forgiving of guys' looks. Height and baldness are a different matter. Height is very important for women. It's difficult to get into the search set. I mean, women typically search for guys 6 foot and above, if they're, of regular height. And a guy who's 5'4", in fact, there was a study Ariely did, which was, I think it's on bigthink.com. And he did a study to see how much more a guy who was short in stature would have to earn to get the same sort of attention as a guy who's like 6 foot.
I see.
And he actually put a number on it. You've got to be earning over like 300 grand to be a man of more, not of height, to get the same sort of attention.
I never knew you would be able to put money on height, but here we have it.
That's the reality of it. There are other things that you can bring to the table in terms of success to be admired and be attractive. And I think that's where we don't really help our users very much, get that kind of reality check. It's like, okay, you are this and you're searching for this. There's, it's going to be tough. And so what we find is, I think we suffer from is getting people to show off their characters, getting people to show off who they really are. And that's where video is very refreshing. And that's where games are interesting, because people can then come out and be show off who they are and be attractive in that sense as well.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, along the lines of the things that we've just talked about, those are things that people like height. You can't really do much about that. But there are ways to make yourself more attractive. What sort of advice would you give a listener who's thinking of going on the dating market? What sort of advice would you give them on how to be successful at dating, about getting lots of matches, for example?
Or just one right match. We'll settle for finding the one, if you will.
I think it's a game of numbers, but it's not a game of spam. I think a trap that a lot of guys fall into is they just hammer out the same email to everybody. And that is very unattractive and very, women get inundated very quickly. And it's one of the downfalls of traditional dating apps is attractive, in-demand women will get absolutely lambasted with attention, and they'll bail as a consequence. And some guys, I mean, especially younger guys, if you think about the economics of a dating app, then you have, a woman of 21 is going to get attention from a guy of 21, 31, 41, 51, you get my drift. A guy of 21 is going to get attention from, 18 to 25, unless he's on a
Kroger app?
apps. bring together older women with younger guys, but ultimately the economics is broken, and so we have to fix that. We have to kind of fix the flow of communication and introductions, and it's not an easy problem to fix and tune for, because we've got to make sure the women who are getting a lot of attention are not inundated. And so that's what I like about. There's a newer trend that started with Momo in China, and what they did was a most unlikely format. I didn't really see this coming, but they do one-to-many video, and what happens is you'll get these folks who are more outgoing, a bit more egocentric, a bit more, and they're getting lots of attention. You give them a way to reach more people at once. And so they'll go on, they'll play the guitar, they'll have a chat about their day, and they'll be talking to a multitude of people at the same time.
Wait, so this is The Bachelor? This is
The Bachelor. I love it. Do you get a rose at the end?
I mean, they're doing a couple of $1 billion revenue.
It's amazing.
Incredibly well out of China. And so I'm working with the Meet Group, and they've actually rolled out the same format but westernized it and added a game, and that's working out very well for them, and they're enabling more apps to do that, and they've acquired a number of apps in different realms, and that's fascinating because they solve for that economic imbalance, because the people who are more introverted that don't necessarily want to be the center of attention can kind of hang out, observe, get comfortable, see what's going on, and get to know people, not only the people that they're observing in the video, but the people who are in the threads commenting. And so they can actually, you've got the kind of this you've got people approaching each other from within the threads and getting to know each other. And this is closer to the real world if you think about it. And the general design paradigm, when we look at the real world and model it and move that into an app environment, it tends to do well. And I'd say this kind of one-to-many video is modeling more the way the real world works.
I'm a bit confused with this concept, though, so I'm going to have to ask a couple of questions just to get my head around it. But isn't there a massive imbalance then between the person recording these videos, maybe even multiple videos, because again, I don't know how the app works, I don't know if you can, and then a person, say, following them, looking at them, being maybe in some interactions, maybe just being, more quiet, as is typically assumed of an introvert. Again, this is a blatant generalization, but bear with me. But then isn't there the imbalance that the more quiet person feels like they know the person on the video or on the videos much, much better than the person on the videos could possibly know them?
Definitely.
Because this almost seems like the current relationship a lot of like YouTubers or online influencers have with their fans. And that doesn't seem like a very good foundation or even a remotely balanced foundation to start dating on.
There's definitely an entertainment aspect to this, and I think this is people who just want to kind of spend time. We've got this trend that started off really with Tinder. I mean, Tinder started as game kind of style and feel, and people talked about dating apps as a game for the first time. And I think that's what Momo cottoned on to, and then they figured out a way of getting people to stick around longer. And if you catch them in this exploratory phase, they stick around forever. They stick around a lot longer. So the retention, from a business design aspect, it's fantastic compared to regular dating apps, because people will stick around when they're in a relationship too, because it becomes part of their entertainment nexus, a way of bonding, community.
But bonding with whom?
I mean, the Meet Group is kind of softly branded into dating, but it's really about exploring life and who you are and what you're interested in. And it's an alternative to Netflix. So it's just a whole different dynamic that I didn't quite see coming.
If, for example, if you are single, you get onto Tinder, although I suppose Tinder isn't really necessarily the app for relationships. But say you go onto Tinder, you get into a relationship. This is a time you, like you said, you delete Tinder. At least most partners would ask that of their significant other, I presume. But this app, you wouldn't delete because you're still very much invested in it. But what is it that you're invested in that you're still following people who are also producing videos, which is very much like YouTube, or like the community around it, which makes it very much like a social media. And if you are so connected to that app whilst already in a relationship, does this actually give you almost like a free pass to cheat? Is this some type of emotional cheating? Like, I find this very peculiar.
I think you hit the right word, emotion. And I think that's a large part of what we deliver to users that is not often really recognized, is that emotional support aspect. So case in point, I've always struggled with the kind of the philandra class of dating apps. And these are the dating apps that bring people together who are married.
Mm-hmm.
I look at that, so I struggle with that. I was like, how does that work? Why is there a place for this? There is a place for it. But I talked to the CEO of one of these companies. I'm not going to give them the joy of naming them.
I see.
But he was great. He provided me a real moment of a realization, and that was that people go on his app because they want emotional support. They're not that often really meeting up. You've got people who are missing something in their relationship, and often it comes in the form of emotional support. And that's what they find through these philandra dating apps, is they get a chance to flirt. They get a chance of feeling whole and supported and listened to. And that's where we've got to be careful, I think, in relationships, is we've got to continue to support and listen and provide emotional support. If half of if a spouse does not get that, they will look for it elsewhere.
I see.
And that's where these apps provide some fulfillment. And I think that's where really Momo and the Meet Group apps are very fulfilling, because they provide that human connection in the context of dating. So there's that element of hope and interest and sexiness in a decent format that gets people to connect for now, for the long term. Even when they're in a relationship, they can still look in on these services and just kind of connect with people, and that's good. That's good for people's emotions, feeling of connection. But you're right. I think there's more that we can do in this format in terms of helping people kind of connect more meaningfully. The listeners have the ability to IM. It is live, by the way. It's not recorded.
Oh,
so you
okay.
kind of go in and you're seeing people live. And so you can converse with them. And what's more interesting is you can reward them. So you
With
can actually
money?
give them there's usually in the form of some kind of the things that they give, like unicorn. You can give them a unicorn, and that's worth so much points. But the interesting thing is, the broadcaster gets a financial reward for that. So that's where Momo really thinks
this is monetary. This just sounds like YouTube. This sounds like a social media app where the hottest people or the most outgoing people are just somehow making money from this. This to me just sounds like some type of TikTok. This can't be dating. Is this the future of dating, Mark? Is this what we're heading in for? Because I'm scared.
Well, it's a nudge. I think about it. There are some people who make a career out of it. There are some people who are earning six figures off this kind of dynamic, but they are the outliers. I always think about the effort of dating. You got to show up. There's a 4-letter word which is to be avoided when dating. Is a 4-letter word, and that is home. If you stay home, you're not going to find any joy.
I see.
And so people do need to kick themselves in the ass to get out there, right? And so kind of this kind of dynamic gets people to kick themselves in the ass and get on video and go meet people. It's rather like a party. When you're sitting at home, you're like, I don't know if I want to go to this party. I've got to get dressed up, and I'm going to feel maybe I'll feel overwhelmed there. I'm feeling a bit shy today. I don't know that many people. You give yourself all these excuses not to go to the party. But having that small nudge, that potential for some kind of reward in terms of attention, rewards even in terms of getting a little prize, which is really the dynamic mentally that these apps are looking for, is to give people a prize from one user to another for being interesting, for being them, for being human. And I think it models the real world. I mean, we in a real world, you go to a party, you get the prize in terms of joyful exchanges, and people being nice to you and kind of, you get this emotional lift from going to a party. Well, they've kind of enhanced that in this environment. They've modeled the real world, but in some ways enhanced the dynamic, which is just enough to get people to do it.
So it's a way in which you can give and receive social currency, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. It's not explicit in terms of currency. I mean, it's not like, oh, here's $10. It's like, here's an image that flashes on the screen. Everybody goes, wow, okay, hooray. It's not about the money. It's about the image. It's about the recognition.
Yeah. And it's about reducing the barriers. I think, like you said, this idea about effort of going out and dating. I mean, in my own life, I've felt sometimes that I've had to go on 10 very bad, mediocre dates to have one good one. And the effort of having that, 1 in 10, it almost seems like, should I even bother?
Right. There's a fear factor there with going out in the real world. The amount of effort it takes to go out and then find out that the person in front of you is actually misrepresented online. They've shown a photograph that's considerably different from who they really are. Not necessarily catfishing, but
well, I've been on a date where I would argue most definitely that I was catfished. I was like, I don't know if this is good angles, great lighting, or this is like a picture from 10 years ago, but I felt catfished for sure.
And I've also felt catfished by people's personalities. So they may look like their picture, but we have absolutely nothing in common. We're not really compatible on a level that goes beyond looks and physicality. And I mean, for me, I found that quite difficult with dating apps because a lot of it is based on first initial reaction to what people look like.
Here's the key. Most apps nudge people to put up a decent photograph, but try to advise them not to do glamour shots. So I think where users can fall into a trap is when they put up a glamour shot, something that's they've gone to a professional photo shoot, then they've actually gone in and made changes to the photograph. I think the perfect example, actually, not glamour, but I remember a guy I worked with some years ago, and he started a dating app because he did want to date. And I looked at his photograph. I was like, dude, you look really good in this photograph. What have you done? And he was a very slender fellow. He was quite lanky and kind of skinny. And what he'd done is he'd changed the aspect ratio just a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
And it completely, he was actually he was a handsome dude when he changed his aspect ratio. Otherwise, he was a little bit, developer scrawny.
Oh, bless him.
Harsh words, Mark. Harsh words.
I know. I let him have it. I was very surprised he did that. But I don't think the end result would have been very good because people show up. Sure, you have a chance then to have your character bubble up, but I think it's misrepresentation. And I think there's no way to start a long-term loving relationship. It's just the wrong foot to get off on.
No, absolutely. But I think the experience that Sarah had where people catfished her with their personality is actually something I experienced as well, where I'm very extroverted and the people I tend to hang out with are also quite extroverted. We get loud. But the thing is, so this is actually also something that I tend to look for in a partner, to just, have a good time, go out, go party, have, whatever. And then there are these people that would approach me via, say, a dating app or maybe even Facebook or any type of social media. And they present themselves in that light. They text you back quickly and they text back witty jokes, funny stuff. And you have really intelligent and just really good banter, if you will, to stay on the English track, the proper banter online. But then when it comes to face, and this is where an extrovert always wins, or, at least shows their colors. If you're an extrovert, you can do this offline as well and directly face to face, unless you're like super, super nervous. But then you can get catfished by a personality. If the person that, that is talking to you, sending you God knows how many messages, being funny, being really direct, and et cetera, is suddenly sitting opposite you, being completely quiet, that feels like a lie.
Yeah, I completely understand. I've actually been in that position, really, I think, in the past.
It's the worst, because you don't know what to do, because you thought you knew the person, well, to some extent, let's be honest, but this version of them is something you've never dealt with. Like, what are you supposed to do then? You can hardly run away from them.
You know, in that environment, there's a lot of pressure, and some people falter under that kind of pressure, especially if they're entirely bowled over. You know, if the person in front of them is somebody they really, really, really like, and it's almost a mismatch in their heads, then their behavior is going to be different. And that's where I think that those first dates are not really showing the truth. People don't, and this is where the games help, I think.
Okay.
I think for you to have the right kind of date, I mean, a dinner date is tough like that. You're sitting right opposite someone that you have built up some interest, significant interest in, perhaps, and then there you are. It's almost like you're performing.
Sure.
It's not natural. So I think to have this is another area I think that dating apps could help by actually saying, okay, you do this instead. Here's some guidelines based on your characters and who we know you are. We know you both like these things. What do you think of this? Why don't you play a game of cards? Anything, but don't think of yourself on a date, because it's going to be stunted and not a good experience when one or both people at the date are feeling significantly under pressure.
But would this game have to happen online or offline, or does that actually not matter that much?
You know, one thing I did, there was many years ago, I went into rock climbing. Actually, I don't know why I thought of that. I just seen, like, there was a girl that I was very interested in, and I couldn't communicate properly with her. I've had this time and time again, which is, you know, I really liked her, but what the hell can I do? I knew I couldn't go on a dinner date with her. So we went into rock climbing, and that was a good experience because we let our guard down. We could talk and have a, you know, not a proper conversation, but at least we got to know each other a bit better through that crazy experience. That helped.
Okay, so here's a bit of a topical question. How do you think this current global pandemic situation where we're all self-isolating has actually changed dating? And do you think it's going to have an effect on how people date going far into the future?
So we see an interesting effect around Thanksgiving and Christmas and through to Valentine's, actually. And that is that we see a considerable bump in the amount of business we get. And we generally surmise that the reason for that is that people that get together at that Thanksgiving dinner table and they see their siblings who are paired and they get the hot and loaded questions from their parents. It's like, okay, so who are you dating? And so they feel very aware of their singleness. I think what's happening right now, and the reason that the dating industry is generally up 20 to 40% in terms of activity, all the dating apps I've been talking to, I've been asking them, how's business? And the response has been very consistently, we are up 20 to 40% in terms of activity. It's like, okay, that's very interesting. Why is that? I think what's happening is very much the Thanksgiving effect. People are aware of their singleness, but now even more hyper aware of their singleness because they're staring at four walls and they're looking around thinking, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe there's more to my life that I'd like to fulfill. And that's usually in the form, I think, of wanting a significant other. And so what do? They look around, they look at their phone, and then they join up an app and they spend time on that app. I think that's what we're seeing now. And I think the formats that are working very well right now are video dating because they can actually do that video date. We're actually actively, as an industry, recommending people don't date, which is really weird. So if you go on idea.gp, I've actually put up a general advisory as well through the Internet Dating Excellence Association, which a few dating app CEOs agreed on. And each dating app is generally pushing out advisories saying, hold off a bit and use the instant messaging and get to know people more within the app on the platform where it's safe, generally. Safer, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And then, hey, there'll be plenty of chance to date. But, you know, line up those dates so that when all this craziness hopefully subsides sooner rather than later, then you can go out on dates that you've really, really qualified out as people being people that you're really interested in. So I think that's the general position of the dating industry. Video's doing well. We're up. I think people are going to be more hooked on dating apps afterwards.
Do you think we'll see more successful dates after we've been let out of isolation. Sort of this idea of we've been forced not to physically date anyone for a period of a couple of months.
I think the people are going to be hyper aware of their singleness, and that's going to have a longer term effect. They're going to be coming out of this period and more serious minded, quite simply. I think they'll be a little bit more serious minded. They'll want someone with them, not just for the night, but for perhaps a lifetime.
I guess we just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, maybe the year of 2021 will be the year of many, many marriages happening. Who even knows?
Yes, and quarantines. I think a lot more babies too,
Yes,
for the ones that are in
yes,
relationships.
Yes.
For sure. I guess, Merle, do you have any final questions?
I've got another two. One is a bit funnier than the other. I'm gonna start off with the a more sciencey based one. So there is a bit of research going into, attractiveness and arousal. So the idea that you should wear red on a first date because it's apparently a color that attracts attention and is very pleasing to the eye, or contrasts well. The idea that people are more attracted to people who are symmetric as a sign of health, or anything that signals a sign of health is found to be attractive. But also the idea that if you can invoke an adrenaline rush in your date, because there was research from, I think, the 70s, where people were asked to walk across a very high, very scary bridge. And if they crossed that bridge and then they, still had their adrenaline pumping in their blood, then the person they saw at the other side of the bridge, they were deemed to be more attractive. And these they were actually men crossing the bridge. They found the female experimenter more attractive and were actually more likely to ask for her phone number. Is there anything from this type of research that we can use on like our first date? Like, should we wear red? Should we, do something that creates an adrenaline rush? What can we do for a very successful first date, or just to get the attraction going?
I think don't go on a dinner date. I think
Sure.
ultimately hiking is great. What is it? So basically, when you hike, there are polyphenylethylamines which are released in the blood, which make you more open to starting a relationship. So there's a lot of kind of physiological things going on based on what you're doing. And sitting down, being static and eating is probably not the best thing to do. Standing up, having a taste of wine, socializing with other people, that's closer to a setting that I think people are going to be more amenable to starting a relationship. And certainly a hike, or, in a more extreme case, why not indoor rock climbing, or, anything where you're getting some kind of interaction where barriers are let down and physiologically you're more open to a relationship is going to have a better outcome.
I see. So I should go bungee jumping. Bungee jumping is not off the table, I see.
Who knows? Jumping out of an aeroplane. I mean, you're going to jump out of that aeroplane and then be riding high on adrenaline. So I think that at least makes a very memorable experience. And I think doing humdrum doesn't really make you stand out. Doing that dinner date, unless it's somewhere, do that after doing something interesting. So I think there's a lot more to take into account. I'm a big believer in priming. That's one of the most amazing aspects of behavioral science. I think of an example where if you take a briefcase into a meeting, a negotiation, then the parties will negotiate harder. As one of the priming examples. There's so many examples of what you wear, what colors you have, the way you behave is going to have a response from the other party. And so a lot of it's down to common sense, really. I mean, you've got to be who you are, but put a bit of effort in and do something different. And if you do something different where you are getting a little excited, you'll at least have an interesting experience. And perhaps even start a new relationship.
Okay. Well, with these tips, they actually quite nicely lead to my last question. So you've just given us and our listeners some tips on, having a good first date, actually maybe making it happen. Now I've got a question for you that I hope you don't find too personal. You've described yourself as a 6. You've described your wife as a 9. How did a 6 get a 9?
Well, how did we... Well, what did we have? It wasn't margaritas.
It was alcohol. Okay, then.
We went to a party. And it was a matter of, I think we were very available, actually. I think we were both very available. So I was in Prague going to the European Internet Dating Conference, and my buddy had said, you got to come and speak at this conference. I was like, I don't want to go to Prague. I'm happy in America. My clients are all here. Why do I need to go to Europe? And he said, the women are hot.
He knew you well.
That got my full attention. And then he said, I've got a penthouse in the middle of Prague,
Nice.
and you can stay here. It's like, okay, that's interesting. So it was implied with that he'd run a party or two or three.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. He ran these upadkovi parties, which is a very cheeky kind of old Czech word, which means rich homeless person, which essentially, well, he wasn't that rich and he wasn't really homeless, but it kind of came across that way. So he ran these upadkovi parties and invited friends out and people that he'd met. And at the second one, it was my going away party. I was leaving the following day. I think I'd been there 2-3 weeks, enjoyed it, but hadn't really met anybody. I'd not put that much effort in. But in walked Arena. I was standing on the balcony, supping beer, surrounded by Czech guys who, in this case, certainly were wonderfully passive. She walked in and started speaking in Czech. And actually, she told me later, she said, does anyone here speak Czech? And I remember thinking, literally, there's no way in hell I'm going to let this chick speak another word of Czech. And I steamed right on in there. She said, hello, I'm Mark. And apparently she was entirely smitten.
Excellent.
And then
it's a good story.
I was hunting her. She was hunting me throughout the rest of the party, keeping an eye on each other. And then we just kind of managed to find the moment. And there was one moment she kicked her head back and she was laughing at some photographs. We were showing each other daft photographs and she laughed and she kicked her head back. And that's my moment. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm in trouble. And I just remember thinking, I'm in big trouble here. And we never looked back. And I didn't go home. I didn't fly back the following day. I stuck around for another 5 weeks and got to know her.
That's really romantic. Damn, Mark, nicely done.
Yeah, so it's down to chemistry. I'm a bit, chemistry is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, we don't really indicate chemistry very well online, and that's one of our big challenges. It's like, how do you actually get people to feel chemistry? And that's one of the big challenges. And one of the funny oxymorons with chemistry.com, which is one of the more, one of the leading compatibility profiling dating sites that didn't do that well, actually. You don't see much of them these days. But they're very much an oxymoron. They're called chemistry, but how on earth do you indicate chemistry in computer-mediated communication? How on earth does that happen? That's our challenge, really.
All right. Well, then I think that is a lot of information. I'm sure our listeners can definitely apply this to their own life, and I hope they do so successfully. Sarah, do you have any remaining questions, or are we happy to let Mark go?
Well, my only remaining question would be, if we want to find out more and keep up with what you're doing, Mark, where can we find you online?
So I run 2 sites that are very on topic for this, for both behavioral economics and online personals, internet dating. So to monitor the news on the dating industry, since 2004, we've been summarizing the news daily at onlinepersonalswatch.com, otherwise opw.news is the shortcut. And then while I was studying behavioral science at London School of Economics, I somehow managed to land buying behavioural.economist.com. And now we've launched that as a Facebook group. It's growing extremely rapidly. There's 1,000 people a week at this stage. I've got 21,000 members. And we do things a little differently. We're not so focused on policy. We're focused on business and personal context of behavioral economics. So kind of, improving your decision making and improving your business, and less focus on policy, which is what I think other outlets focus on more. I think we've drawn that line of delineation as business and personal and improving your life, and that's behavioural.economist.com.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to apply this to my own life. I told myself I'd stay single until I finished the PhD, but I might still give these tips a good go. In the name of science, of course.
Yeah, think of it as an experiment, Mala.
Absolutely. I always do.
Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the podcast. I mean, I think that I managed to learn quite a lot of stuff about the behavioral science of online dating just in 1 hour. That's fantastic. I mean, what did you learn today, Mela?
Well, I mainly learned that, to find the one, you need to be the one. Like, you can't just expect from others that they're ideal and then be, not so ideal yourself. So I think that's a good lesson. I'll do some hard work on myself.
Lots of introspection needed, I think.
Absolutely.
And for me, I learned that online dating could look more like The Bachelor than I ever previously thought. So I'm actually really hyped for that. That sounds like a super interesting social experiment.
I'm not hyped for that at all. I'm old school. I'm old school, mate. I just want, you meet, you have that chemistry, and you move on and you live happily ever after. I don't want The Bachelor. I don't want any of this.
I mean, you can't say it's not efficient. You know what they say about competition, right? It drives down prices. We reach equilibrium.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, sorry.
You're such an economist. Just leave it. I think maybe the most important thing we've learned from Mark today, that it is good to manage your expectations. I don't think I'm gonna log into Hot or Not anytime soon. I don't think my sense of self needs that type of shock. But
No, that's information I don't think I need.
No.
Whether or not I'm actually as good looking as I think I am.
No. I think you're better looking than you think you are.
Well, my mother always says that I've got a face for radio, so I'm living my dream.
Well, isn't it a good thing then that we're doing a podcast?
Hey, see, I'm so well suited for this.
Totally. Oh my god. Okay. Well, to actually wrap this up, in the style of behavioral science, so prepare yourself for what online dating is going to look like, because it's going to be a wild, wild ride, which might end up being more like a reality TV show streamed online, live for your pleasure. And it's going to be you sitting down with someone else and just discussing what you want from life. Ooh, on the final note, Sarah, what is the main thing that we learned today?
The main thing that we learned was that once you take your online dating offline and into reality, don't go on a dinner date. That's the punchline.
Death to the dinner date.
I mean, Merle's going to go bungee jumping. I'll go rock climbing. And someone else can go swimming with sharks, and we'll see who does better.
Yes, dear audience. Actually, on the socials after this episode, reach out to us via Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or wherever you want as a reaction to this episode. Now that you know that the dinner date is dead, what are you going to do for a first date? Are you going to go swimming with sharks? I need to know. I need this type of research in my life.
I need more tips.
That too. That too.
I need more ideas.
Okay. Oh, for sure. Well, guys, this was the first interview-based episode of Questioning Behaviour. We hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to tune in for the next one. See ya!
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Questioning Behaviour. Tune in to our next episode to find out which behaviour we will be questioning next.
A podcast is a bit of a one-way medium. We're talking to you, but you can't actually talk back. If you'd like a more interactive exchange, do reach out to us via our socials. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. Just look for Questioning Behaviour. We're also on Twitter using @QB_podcast. We're looking forward to hearing from you. See ya!
Bye!